The Honorable, the Vice President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations so that, setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the Vice President.
Honorable Senators, leave of absence has been granted to Senator the Honorable Dennis Moses and Senator Sophia Choate SC, both of whom are out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from Her Excellency the President, Paula May Weeks, OR-TT. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, by Her Excellency Paula May Weeks, OR-TT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Ms. Folade Mutota, whereas Senator Sophia Choate SC is incapable of performing her duties as a senator by reason of her absence from Trinidad and Tobago, now therefore I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Folade Mutota, to be a member of the Senate temporarily, with effect from the 2nd of July 2019, and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of Senator Sophia Choate SC, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the Office of the President, St. Anne's, this first day of July 2019. Honorable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Folade Mutota, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Honourable Senators, I crave your indulgence to revert to this item on the order paper, as we have one more senator to swear in for Senator Moses. Honourable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Honourable Bridget Mary Anisette George, MP, Speaker of the House. Establishment of Joint Select Committee. At a sitting held on Wednesday, June 26, 2019, the House of Representatives agreed to the following resolutions. 1. Resolved that, in accordance with Standing Order 68-1, the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019 be referred to a Joint Select Committee hereby established, and that this committee be empowered to consider and report on the general merits and principles of the bill and report by September the 27th, 2019. 2. Resolved that, subject to the concurrence of the Senate on the establishment of the Joint Select Committee on the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019, the following 6 members be appointed to serve on the committee: Mrs. Camille Robinson-Regis, MP; Mrs. Marlene McDonald, MP; Mr. Anthony Garcia, MP; Mr. Esmond Ford, MP; Dr. Surjitan Rambachan, MP; Mr. Rudanat Indar Singh, MP. I respectfully request that the Senate be informed of these decisions at the earliest convenience. Respectfully, Bridget Mary Anisette George, Speaker of the House.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives, the Miscellaneous Provisions Pension Bill 2019, in the name of the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 62-1B, I beg to move that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the proceedings.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the proceedings. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The next stage of the bill will be taken later in the proceedings.
Petitions.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I beg to present a petition on behalf of Ms. Sonel David Longe, Attorney at Law of MG Daly and Partners of 115A Abercrombie Street, Port of Spain. I move that the clerk be allowed to read the petition. Thank you.
Yes, to read it. Honourable Senators, is it agreed? Clerk, please proceed.
Your petitioner is the instructing attorney at law on record for Ronald Walcott, the Chief Executive Officer of Telecommunications Services of Trinidad and Tobago, TSTT, the claimant, in claim number CV 20180544. By that claim, the claimant seeks damages for defamation against Dane Wilson, the defendant, in respect of certain statements published on Facebook by the defendant. It is the claimant's case that statements published by the defendant have negatively affected the claimant's professional reputation, including but not limited to negative parliamentary attention and review of business decisions made by the claimant in his capacity as CEO of TSTT. By order dated 12th October 2018, the Honorable Justice Budu Singh ordered the parties to file and exchange witness statements on or before 14th January 2019. However, through joint applications made to the Honorable Court, the parties have agreed to extend the deadline for filing of witness statements in this claim to 9th July 2019. The claimant wishes to adduce evidence of certain questions raised and responses given in the course of parliamentary proceedings as evidence of the impact of the defendant's defamatory publications on his professional and personal reputation. In particular, the claimant seeks to have the following extracts of the Hansard reports produced and referred to in the witness statement of the claimant and at the trial of this claim. A. An extract of the Hansard report for the matter on the adjournment of the Senate held on 22nd January 2019 in relation to the need for the government to launch an investigation at TSTT having regard to recent reports of improper procurement practices and their effect on the company's financial stability. B. An extract of the Hansard report in relation to question number 75, which was answered on 19th February 2019. And C. An extract of the Hansard report in relation to question number 142, which was answered on 15th May 2019. To validate the authenticity of the evidence to be adduced, the petitioner humbly requests that the clerk of the Senate or other such officer responsible for the making of the Hansard report in the Senate swear to an affidavit referring to and exhibiting the said Hansard reports of the proceedings or extracts thereof, and attest that they are the true record of what was said in the Senate and on the said dates. The petitioner therefore humbly prays that the Senate do grant leave for the clerk of the Senate or such other officer, 1, to swear to an affidavit referring to and exhibiting the said extracts of the Hansard reports of the proceedings or extracts thereof, and attesting that they are the true record of what was said in relation to A, the matter on the adjournment of the Senate held on 22nd January 2019 on the need for the government to launch an investigation at TSTT having regard to recent reports of improper procurement practices and their effect on the company's financial stability. B, the oral answer to question number 75 as answered on 19th February 2019, and C, the oral answer to question number 142 as answered on 15th May 2019. 2, to attend the hearing before the Honorable Judge, if required, on such dates as the matter may be adjourned from time to time by the court. And your petitioner in duty bound will ever pray. Dated this first day of July 2019. Signed, Sonel David Long, Attorney at Law, MG Daly and Partners.
Just a sec. Honorable Senators, the question is that the petitioner be granted leave to proceed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Leave is granted.
Papers.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of National Security and the Minister of Education. The Immigration Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2019, the Annual Administrative Report of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, UTT, for the period October 2015 to September 2016.
Reports from committees.
Senator Obiko.
Madam President, I have the honor to present the following reports as listed on the order paper in my name. The 22nd report of the Public Accounts Committee, 4th session, 2018-2019, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2010 to 2016. The 24th report of the Public Accounts Committee, 4th session, 2018-2019, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2008 to 2011.
Senator Vieira.
Madam President, I have the honor to present the following reports as listed on the supplemental order paper in my name. The 10th report of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, 4th session 2018 to 2019, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the operations of Lake Asphalt of Trinidad and Tobago 1978 Limited, and to determine its effectiveness at fulfilling its mandate. And the 11th report of the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises, 4th session 2018 to 2019, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the activities, administration, and operations of national flour mills, including the company's role in the processing of rice from local farmers.
Urgent questions.
Senator Mark.
Thank you, Madam. To the Minister of National Security, can the Minister indicate whether it is the intention of the government to facilitate the return to Trinidad and Tobago of several women and children currently being detained at the Al-Hol refugee camp in Syria?
Minister of National Security, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, the government is on record and maintains the position as follows. The government has to treat with all of these issues very carefully. This Al-Hol refugee camp houses persons who have fled from ISIS war zones. And the first thing the government has to do is a verification exercise. The government has policies and procedures which we have implemented, including the use of Team Nightingale, which is a multi-agency task force comprising the Children's Authority, counter-trafficking unit or counter-terrorism units, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, immigration, persons from Ministry of National Security and other agencies or intelligence services. We liaise with other intelligence services and agencies from around the world, and the government cannot give any such undertaking at this time. One of the first things that needs to be done is a verification of who exists, what is their background, whether they are in fact citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and we will continue to do our work. With matters of national security, especially of this nature, there's very little that can be said about the particulars.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, can the Minister indicate whether he can confirm citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, children, women, are detained in this particular camp in Syria? Can the Minister share with the Parliament?
Yes, I think the Minister.
Madam President, as I just said, the first thing that needs to be done is a verification exercise. So at this stage, nothing can be confirmed.
Senator Mark.
Can the Minister indicate what kind of period a verification exercise will take for confirmation to be had?
Minister.
No, I can't.
Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of Public Utilities, having regard to reports to low water levels at the country's main water dams, can the Minister indicate what urgent measures are being implemented to ensure an equitable water supply to various communities?
Minister of Public Utilities, you have 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, the population will recall that at the beginning of the dry season, I mentioned that the country was coming out of one of the worst dry seasons in the past 19 years and the third worst dry season in the past 70 years. As a result, the levels of the dam that we are starting at in the rainy season were very low. Madam Speaker, the amount of rainfall that we have experienced in June is still below the historic levels of 224 versus a historic high of 252. As a result of that, our dams for the month of June is now at the levels of 17.78%, with a historic average in Navet being 45.8%, Hollick 17.34%, historic average 48.8%, and Hillsborough 30.4%, historic average 53.9%. Madam Speaker, due to these low levels of water in our reservoirs, WASA has been forced to cut back on production to 10 million gallons of water in the Navet area and somewhere between 40 and 60 million gallons of water in the Caroni area. The Navet area continues to be the hardest hit area, but because of the work that we have been able to do over the past 2 years at the Sabonetta booster, we are now for the first time taking water from Caroni and getting it down to Barrapo, and getting water from Caroni up to Princestown. We are not in a position to take the water from Caroni and get it up to Miaro, and therefore that's where some of the challenges are. I have been in contact with the MP for Miaro. We worked over the weekend and we got some trucks up there. I have been in close contact with the regional corporation head in Siparia, and up to this morning he confirmed that that area has settled down nicely, and he thanked me for the work that we've been doing. So we continue to put things in place. Conservation continues to be important. We produce still about 220 million gallons of water, all right? And therefore, they're asking the citizens to do their part.
Your time is up. Senator Mark.
Can the minister indicate what is being done to address the lack of supply to various communities, particularly in the areas that you have mentioned, which has witnessed no water in taps for 2 weeks? What efforts are being made to address that?
Well, Madam Speaker, again, as I said, I've been working closely with the MPs in this area and the regional corporations, and we are augmenting the existing supply. Some of them are now getting pipe-borne water because we are pushing the water from Sabonetta, but we are augmenting it with truck-borne water. We are working to see how we could improve the boosters in the Princestown booster station going forward, all right, so as to be able to take water from Caroni and get it up there. But again, there are areas that continue to get good supplies of water 24/5, 24/7, close to the water sources, and really it is about conservation. People who have needs to manage their water so that we will have more water to send to the extremities. It's really needed to be our brother's keeper. As a country, we produce enough water, but we are working on fixing the interconnectivity issues. We are working on reducing the leaks, and we are asking the citizens to play their part in conserving water as much as possible.
Yes. To the Minister of Finance, in light of recent reports of unnecessary delays in the clearing of goods and equipment by customs officers at two of the country's main ports, can the minister state what action is being taken to address this situation?
Minister in the Ministry of Finance, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, in the current environment in which we operate, where there's an emphasis on heightened border security, and given the proliferation of firearms and drugs on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, the Customs and Excise Division has embarked on a system where the vigilant examination of containerized cargo is now the focus. And this has resulted in some delays in the processing and clearing of containers. To mitigate these delays, the division has reviewed the focus that it places on low-risk containers and amended the processing of such containers to reduce the time taken, and there's an assurance to the stakeholders that in July they should see an improvement in the processing of containers on the port. It must be borne in mind that in the month of July there were 3 public holidays which further exacerbated the speed of clearing of containers. But this does not reflect the norm, and having regard to the shortage of staff in the division, in the normal course of things, the processing of containers is viewed as reasonable in the circumstances. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, can I ask through you to the Minister whether any discussions have taken place with the key stakeholders who have been affected as a result of this delay given the circumstances that you have outlined?
Minister.
Madam President, the key stakeholders would have lodged their main complaints with the Controller of Customs, and it is for that reason that they have reviewed how they treat with the lower risk container approach of processing.
Senator Sobers.
Minister, with regard to the demurrage charges that would have accrued to many of the importers based upon the situation, is the ministry looking at possibly assisting or offsetting some of those costs that would have been incurred by these importers during that period of time?
Minister.
Madam President, that is an issue that will be addressed by the customs on a case-by-case basis.
Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Minister of Health, in light of the mix-up in communication to the family of a patient who had not died at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, can the minister state whether an investigation is being conducted in this matter?
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I rise to respond on behalf of the government. The Minister of Health is at present at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. An investigating team led by the CEO is looking into this matter. All facts are being unearthed. The Minister has ordered the CEO to hold a meeting with the affected families to share the information. The results of the investigation will also be used to strengthen our systems at Eric Williams to prevent a reoccurrence of such a serious matter.
Honourable Senators, while the Minister was giving his response, the time for urgent questions has expired.
Questions on notice. Questions for oral answer.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, the government is pleased to announce it will be answering questions number 162, 199, 200, 201, 259, 273, and 293. We ask for a deferral of 2 weeks for 292 and 294. And 294. With regards to written questions, we will be answering questions, well, answers will be forwarded, or has been forwarded to the Senate, to questions 269, 277, 278, 282, 287, 289, and 297.
So questions numbers 292, 294, 276, 288, and 299 are deferred for 2 weeks, for 14 days. Senator Mark.
Thank you. Question number 162 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, given the statements by the Executive Director of Impacts that more resources should be directed to protect our country's maritime borders, I respond as follows. The Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, or Coast Guard, currently has the largest maritime fleet within the Caribbean. In order to achieve relative omnipresence within the maritime domain, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is in the process of acquiring 2 hostile Cape-class vessels from hostile shipbuilding in Australia. It is envisaged that these additional assets will assist in effectively predicating, deterring, detecting, and prosecuting threats to our nation's security within our maritime borders. Furthermore, the Coast Guard has employed the use of layers of security to protecting the nation's borders. These layers assist in delivering early indicators and warnings of any potential incursion into Trinidad and Tobago's domain, as well as creates a continuous surveillance and deterrence measures at particular points on land.
Senator Mark?
Yes. Can the minister indicate when these two additional vessels being constructed by Hostal will be delivered to the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Coast Guard?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, it is envisaged at this stage, all things being equal, that these two hostile Cape-class patrol vessels will be delivered to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in 2020.
Senator Mark? Or Senator Hussain?
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, through you, can the Minister inform the Senate how many Coast Guard vessels are currently being used by the Coast Guard for the protection of our country's borders, please?
Minister?
Madam President. Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, we currently have eight of our larger patrol vessels being utilized, as well as a number of our interceptors being utilized. So CG-21, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and CG-60 are being utilized. I think currently one or two of those vessels are crossing paths with dry docking taking place up in Curacao.
Senator Mark?
Can the minister share with the Senate what are these layers outlined by him, layers of security used in order to protect our country's borders?
Minister?
Madam President, as I said a short while ago, the specific particulars related to national security, I'm not at liberty to divulge. What I can say is the use of vessels as well as our radar system and other technology that we currently have in use.
Senator Mark?
Given the fact that we spent close to $9 million in June of last year to repair our radar system, can the minister indicate whether he's satisfied that that radar system is working and contributing to the protection of our borders?
I'm not allowing that question. Senator Mark,
Yes.
any further questions? Next question. Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam. Question number 199 to the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries.
Madam President, I thank my colleague Senator Mark for this question. Madam President, the Moruga locust was first identified as a pest of national importance in Trinidad 104 years ago, in 1815. And since then, the locusts have been the subject of research. Earlier research, Madam President, shows that 1, generally, locusts remain in forested areas in the southeast areas of Trinidad and Tobago, with hopper bands and adult swarms periodically wreaking havoc on cultivated crops, such as bananas, cocoa, breadfruit, plantain, citrus, and cassava. And 2, locust outbreaks occurred in cycles, some 7 to 15 years apart, with outbreaks lasting for years. Madam President, more recent research has shown that during the 85 to 91 period, locusts were found in counties of Mayaro and Victoria. In the last decade, locust outbreaks have spread to the non-traditional counties of St. Patrick in southwest Trinidad and to far north in County Caroni. Additionally, Madam President, locusts are invading residential areas with increased frequency. Research suggests, Madam President, that these changes are caused by changes in the weather pattern and unregulated land use, including clearing of portions of forest reserves for cultivation and other activities. Accordingly, Madam President, current research focuses on the reasons for the infestation via an annual cycle, the life cycle and vulnerabilities at each growth stage, the prospects for the use of natural predators, the potential for continued spraying as well as other forms of eradication at different growth stages, and finally, the approaches to management of the forest reserves to promote containment of the locusts in that environment. Madam President, apart from the ongoing research, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries has recently embarked on a collaboration with the government of Argentina with the aim of reducing the impact of locusts in Trinidad and Tobago. Argentina, Madam President, has been noted for some level of success in controlling and reducing locust outbreaks and locust-infested areas in that country. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Ma.
Yes, Madam President, given the research that has been conducted, Honorable Minister, can you share with this Parliament, the Senate, what has been the value of destruction to crops and to dislocation that would have resulted from the invasion of these locusts?
No, Senator Mark, that question doesn't arise. You have another question?
Can I ask the Honorable Minister what is being done to address the management of our forest reserves, which seem to be undergoing indiscriminate destruction by uninvited guests in those areas?
No, Senator Mark, that question doesn't arise. Your question as posed is about the research that was commissioned.
No, but
no. So let's focus on the main thrust of your question, please.
No,
Next question, Senator Mark.
Madam, anyway, I'll have to deal with that on another occasion.
Sure.
I'll have to deal with you privately in a meeting because I don't want to deal
All right,
with
Senator Mark.
No.
Senator Mark, I do not want us to go down any road that you seem to want to go down this morning. Please ask your questions.
Yeah, but
Senator Mark, no, Senator Mark, I have said it again and again. When I make a ruling, I want the following word to be let's and moving on. I don't want to hear but, and I don't want to hear any other word like what you were using just now.
Madam Chair, I have a right to speak. Okay?
Senator Mark. No, members, please. Please. Senator Mark, please desist from the line that you are proceeding under. Please desist from it. Ask a question, Senator Mark.
Yeah. So what? Fourth one or what? Anyway, Madam President, may I go on?
Yes.
On the next question. Question number 200 to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I respond to this question on behalf of the government. Madam President, the increasing demand by low and middle income families for government subsidized housing has exposed members of the public to incidents of attempted fraud. The HDC is aware of the fraudsters' efforts and has implemented the following measures. 1. Identification via social media of the fake profiles promoting fraud. Placement of notices and warning messages about scammers via Instagram and Facebook. 2 media releases have been dispatched. It has received positive coverage and attention in the print and electronic media. 1 electronic billboard has been installed on the PTSC building facing South Key to advise citizens of Trinidad and Tobago about the prevalence of fraud. 5th, the installation of billboards along the HDC building on South Key with similar messages. And 7th, the planned installation of a billboard at the Harmony Hall site, northbound, with similar messages. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ma.
What impact, if any, these measures have had on these fraudsters?
President, the purpose of all these measures is to bring to the attention of members of the public the operations of the fraudsters, to warn members of the public and to encourage members of the public to deal directly with HDC, and if they have any questions or queries, they should contact the HDC's offices. Thank you.
Senator Ma.
Minister indicate, Madam President, what can you share with us whether there has been a marked decline or decrease in citizens as a result of those measures who have been fleeced by fraudsters? Can you indicate whether the HDC has seen any reduction?
Minister.
Madam President, I'm not in a position to indicate that at this time.
Can you give an undertaking to this honorable Senate that you will supply that in writing at the shortest possible time?
Madam President, I would provide the information at the next sitting. Thank you.
Next question, Senator Ma.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I thank my honorable colleague. Question number 201 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Madam President, currently there are 4 positions for forensic pathologists at the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center. Of these 4 positions, 3 are currently filled by the following personnel: Dr. Burris, Dr. Devines, and Dr. Gajula. The ministry is actively reviewing an application for the 1 vacant position of a forensic pathologist. Once the requisite administrative process is fulfilled and satisfied, consideration will be given to engaging the applicant. As a medium to long-term initiative, the Ministry of National Security has engaged the services of the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP, through the United Nations Volunteer Program to assist in the procurement of 3 additional forensic pathologists. This matter is currently being pursued by the ministry, and it is anticipated that once all administrative issues are fulfilled, the recruitment process can commence. The recruitment process is expected to be completed in another 6 months.
Senator Ma.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Madam President, through you to the Honorable Minister, can the Honorable Minister indicate whether the Forensic Science Center has done an organizational analysis as it concerns the optimum requirement of pathologists needed to deal with the growing workload at that center? Can you share with us whether there's an optimum number that the center would like the government to satisfy?
Minister.
Madam President, as I said, on the current establishment, there are 4 positions, 3 of which are filled. I am not aware of any study that is currently being done or has been done that changes that number.
Senator, okay. Next question, Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Question number 259 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, according to information provided by the Commissioner of Prisons, as at the 15th of April 2019, 155 Venezuelan nationals were incarcerated at our nation's prisons. This included 117 males and 38 females. As at the 25th of June 2019, though, a reduced figure of 142 Venezuelans was recorded, 117 males and 25 females, and this figure is out of a total of 3,950 people in total incarcerated at our nation's prisons.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Can the Honourable Minister indicate a disaggregation in terms of persons on remand, persons convicted,
Minister.
persons at the IDC as well?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, one of the next questions relates to the IDC. The IDC is completely outside of the remit of the prison services. It's actually manned and managed by the Immigration Division. So I will provide the information in another question, and with respect to if the senator asks which day it is he's asking for the disaggregation, I'm sure that that answer can be provided, because every day before 6 a.m. I get a disaggregation of all of the persons in various categories at the nation's prisons.
Senator Mark.
Can I ask through you to the Honorable Minister, if you can indicate to the Senate what are the main offenses these individuals have been incarcerated? Can you indicate to the Senate, if you can share with us, what are the main offenses that the 142 Venezuelans are in that place for at the moment? Can you share with us?
Minister.
No, I can't, Madam President. That information, I don't have that information available.
Can you indicate, can you give this Honorable House an undertaking that you can provide that information in the shortest possible order so that we'll have an appreciation?
I'm sure, Madam President, if the question is asked in the manner that these questions have been asked, i.e. a specific written question, it can be provided, yes.
Senator Sobers.
President, through you, can the minister indicate out of the persons who are no longer incarcerated by virtue of the figures given, whether or not those persons have now been deported back to Venezuela?
Senator Sobers, that question does not arise.
No.
Next question, Senator Richards.
Good morning, everyone. Question number 273 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, this is a question related to the Immigration Detention Center. According to the information provided by the Chief Immigration Officer acting, there were 102 detainees at the facility as at April 30th, 2019. The nationalities of the persons detained at the Immigration Detention Center as at the 30th of April 2019 were Brazilian, Chinese, Cuban, Dominican Republic, Gambian, Ghanaian, Grenadian, Guyanese, Jamaican, Nigerian, Senegalese, and Venezuelans. The following is a breakdown by percentage of the nationalities at the Immigration Detention Center as at the 30th of April 2019. Brazilian, 1%, Chinese, 2%, Cuban, 1%, Dominican Republic, 1%, Gambian, 1%, Ghanaian, 1%, Grenadian, 1%, Guyanese, 3%, Jamaican, 4%, Nigerian, 3%, Senegalese, 1%, Venezuelan, 81%.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the response, Minister. Can the Minister indicate the capacity of the IDC?
Minister.
Madam President, the IDC is currently conformed to comfortably hold 150. Within the next week or so, I'm hoping by the end of next week, I'll be able to announce a further facility I'm declaring as an IDC that will double that capacity.
Senator Richards.
Finally, Minister, thank you, Madam President. And given the response you just provided in terms of the extra capacity of this new facility, is it envisioned, since your announcement about signing deportation form for those persons who are found to be illegally present in Trinidad and Tobago, to deal with that possibility?
I don't understand.
Yeah, I think you have to restate that
Let me restate the question.
Yeah.
Do you expect to need more capacity, given your announcement about signing deportation forms?
Minister.
I don't think there's a direct correlation. A direct correlation would actually be the converse of what you've just suggested. With deportation, it is going to mean more space at the IDC because persons would have left the IDC.
Senator Richards.
I don't think it forms a question, but that would depend on how quickly you deport people. But no
Would
question.
you ask me
Okay,
when
all
I
right.
deport if they'll be more space?
Next question, Senator Hussain.
Very much, Madam President. Question number 293 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the answer for 1, Part A, the service provider is Block/Nuvo Global. 2, The contract price is $11,618,605.35. However, based on a financial arrangement with the authority agreed to a payment in the sum of $315,000 for a period of 60 months. However, the authority have since paid a lump sum of $3,387,250 and a revised contract, and a final price is being renegotiated. At this point in time, no further payment is being made until the revised contract is finalized. The procurement process used to select the service provider was as follows. On May 17, 2016, a request for information, an RFP, was issued to local and international companies for the provision of a car parking revenue management system. These companies were CETAL, Zan American Incorporated, Design Access Corporation, Airport Analytic Gray Matter Software Service Car Park Revenue Management System, Merge Parking Management System, Falcon Eye Global System, Block Nouveau Global, and Mobile Research Solutions Limited. Based upon the response to the RFP, approval was obtained from the board on the 19th December 2016 for 4 companies to be invited based on a selective tender call to submit proposals for the car park revenue. CETAL, Airport Analytic Gray Matter Software Service Car Park Revenue Management System, Block Nouveau Global, and Mobile Research Solutions Limited. A request for proposal was issued on the 31st of January 2017, and proposals were received from 2 companies, CETAL and Block/Nouveau Global. The evaluation committee assessed and submitted proposals. They submitted proposals on April 4th, 7th, 11th, 26th, and 27th, May 3rd, and 16th, 2017. And the proposals were invited to make presentations to the evaluation committee on 11th April 2017. CETAL proposed contract price was $12,825,574. The contract price proposed by Block Nouveau was $11,618,605.35, based on the assumption that the airport authority would pay the amount in a lump sum. The findings of the evaluation committee was received by the tenders committee, and consideration for the cash flow of the airport authority, as well as other factors. Further negotiations were recommended. After these negotiations were completed, the board agreed and approved the award of the contract to Block Nouveau at the term $315,000 per month for 60 months. However, as I said, Madam Speaker, the airport authority did make a lump sum payment that is to be deducted from the capital payment, and a revised price is to be finalized. Thank you.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, it seems quite strange that...
Senator Hussain, please ask a question.
Madam President, can the minister then answer the circumstances in which a contract was awarded to a particular company, Block Nouveau Global, and now has to be renegotiated?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, the contract is not being renegotiated. The final price, the contract price remains the same. There was a financing agreement that became part of the contract. That financing agreement is what is going to be renegotiated, because the airport authority did make a lump sum payment which reduced the capital cost. So it's the financial part, not the contract price. The contract price remains the same for the service provided. Thank you.
Madam President, can the minister then inform this honorable House of who are the owners of Block Nouveau Global, please? Madam President, can the minister then provide to this honorable Senate a copy of the contract in which the authority entered into with Block Nouveau Global?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, like everything else, nothing in this government is secret, and if the honorable senator requests that information, I will pass that information to the airport authority, and once legally afforded, I will make it available to this House. Thank you.
Senator Mark.
May I ask the honorable minister, based on recent reports, that the government has taken a decision to discontinue or to investigate this arrangement between the Airports Authority and the particular company called Block Novo. Is that, well, Madam President, can I ask the Honorable Minister to verify whether those reports have any truth? Can you verify whether this is in fact so?
What exactly is...
I'm asking, Madam President,
Yes.
whether the minister can indicate whether the government has taken a decision to investigate the contract between the Airports Authority and Block Novo. That is the question, Madam President.
Minister.
Madam President, I have no information that the government have taken any decision to investigate Block Novo on this contract or any contract that Block Novo have with the Airport Authority. Thank you.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Can the Minister indicate to this Honorable House what is the duration of this contract, please?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I did indicate that there was a tender for this project, and because of the financing agreement, the Airport Authority, because of their cash flow, had opted for the option of paying for the contract over a 5-year period, plus obviously the financing interest. The Airport Authority have since revisited that position. So if it is a decision is taken based on the down payment to pay off the contract sum, because the contract sum would have been reduced, then there will be no time in this contract. It will be as the supply of a system. The Airport Authority would have paid for it based on a competitive tendering process, and the Airport Authority will then manage the contract. If it is that the airport decides to continue the financing agreement, then that will be determined. But at this point in time, the Airport Authority is renegotiating the financing agreement. The contract price is clear. It was the cheapest bid that they got for $11 million. There is no negotiation with that at this point in time.
Honorable Senators, before we move on to the next item on the order paper, I had indicated that question 299 was deferred for 2 weeks, but question number 299 is not yet due.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, having regard to the correspondence from the Speaker of the House in relation to the establishment of a joint select committee to consider and report by September 27, 2019 on the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019. I beg to move that the Senate concur with the House of Representatives in the establishment of the committee and that the following 6 senators be appointed to serve: Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Mr. Kazim Hussain, Mr. Gavin Simonet, Ms. Khadija Amin, Mr. Paul Richards, and Mr. Derup Timal.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Senate concur with the House of Representatives in the establishment of a joint select committee to consider and report by September the 27th, 2019 on the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019, and that the following 6 senators be appointed to serve: Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Mr. Kazim Hussain, Mr. Gavin Simonet, Ms. Khadija Amin, Mr. Paul Richards, Mr. Derup Timal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Announcements by the President.
Honorable Senators, I will now revert to the appointment of a temporary senator, to Mr. Stuart Young. Whereas Senator the Honorable Dennis Moses is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago. Now, therefore, I, Paula May Weeks, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Ndale Young, to be a member of the Senate temporarily, with effect from the 2nd of July 2019, and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator, the Honorable Dennis Moses, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's this first day of July 2019. Honorable Senators, a senator is required to take the oath.
I, Ndale Young, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities of the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Monday, June the 24th, 2019, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Firearms Act, Chapter 1601. There were 6 contributions made, including the move of the motion, the Attorney General. Senator Hosein, you were speaking last, and you have 9 minutes of speaking time remaining.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And on the last occasion, Madam President, I know it have been some days that have passed, but we were dealing with this firearms, the amendment to the Firearms Act, which was essentially a bill in which the fines and the terms of imprisonment have been increased for certain offenses, and also the introduction of a new offense, trafficking of firearms. And Madam President, on the last occasion, I was making the point that the criminals are the ones who have all of these sophisticated weapons in Trinidad in terms of the types of firearms that are being used. While we have so many businessmen in this country, Madam President, who are currently crying out and begging that they be issued some sort of protection in terms of having a firearm user license so that they can have a firearm in their possession, so that they would not be sitting ducks, Madam President, so that they will have an opportunity, they will have a fighting chance in which they can defend themselves from the criminals and the wrongdoers in this country, the gun-toting criminals who will come to the business places and rob these persons and place their lives in danger and the lives of their employees in danger, Madam President. So the government must do something in terms of helping the Commissioner of Police, resource the Commissioner of Police's office so that businessmen in this country can stand a fighting chance against the criminal elements in Trinidad and Tobago. But, Madam President, this bill will only become effective at the very last stage of the criminal justice system. And that stage is the stage of sentencing. So before we reach there, you must have had detection, you must have had an arrest, you must have had a prosecution, and then you must have had a conviction. Without all of these things, then this bill becomes otiose. It becomes of no use. When you have a detection rate in this country, Madam President, of 28% in 2019, 34% in 2018, 31% in 2017, 24% in 2016, 23% in 2015, Madam President, then we have a serious problem in Trinidad and Tobago. If you do not fix that part of the equation, Madam President, again, this bill becomes of no use whatsoever. You must fix the system before you seek to amend the fines and increase the terms of imprisonment. Madam President, a joint select committee of this Parliament on national security had a startling revelation that the ballistics department at the Forensic Sciences Center, that there are only 2 microscopes that are operational for the examination of firearms and ammunitions in this country. Two, Madam President, that in itself
Senator Hussain, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. It is insufficient. Madam President, I also want to, in my 5 minutes remaining, raise a very significant issue with respect to the constitutionality of this bill. A bill in this similar nature was passed in the year 2010, and on review of that legislation, Madam President, I found that that bill was passed with a special majority, the Firearms Amendment Act of 2010, which bears resemblance to this present bill before us. And Madam President, because it was understood that rights, privileges, and freedoms would be infringed in the particular piece of legislation. But when you look at what is being proposed here, you see that persons will now be sentenced to imprisonment for the remainder of their lives. And that, Madam President, removes any sentencing discretion in which a judge has. And there's a case, Madam President, where this was done before and was struck down by the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago. And that case is the case of Barry Francis and Roger Haynes, Criminal Appeal 5 of 2010 and 6 of 2010. And that, Madam President, 5 judges of the Court of Appeal sat, And that is a very important thing, because when 5 judges sit, more than the usual 3, it means that the case is of enormous public importance. And Madam President, what that case found is that in the Dangerous Drugs Act, mandatory sentences were being imposed and Parliament had passed it. But what did the court do? The court struck down that legislation as being unconstitutional because it usurped the powers of the judiciary. It usurped it. It found that the fines imposed were grossly disproportionate and inordinately excessive. When we as a Parliament pass legislation, we must bear in mind that we are a democracy and legislation must be passed proportional to the legislative aims. And I submit, Madam President, that passing this particular piece of legislation with a mandatory sentence clearly violates and infringes the doctrine of separation of powers, taking this legislation to be unconstitutional, and it will be susceptible to being struck down by the court. And if we don't fix the legislation here, it makes no sense in engaging in this exercise to pass this particular piece of bill. And Madam President, the government, I would hope, would listen to the opposition and maybe some of the voices from the independent bench in terms of trying to fix this particular piece of legislation so that it becomes more palatable. It becomes constitutional, Madam President, so that when we are finished here, we know that we have done the job that we were put here to do. And in closing, Madam President, a very short contribution I have this morning. I submit that this bill will not take firearms off the streets. This bill will not reduce the number of firearms. Madam President, and I say that because this bill comes as a scare tactic, but there's no real clout. Unless you fix the system, then you will get convictions and sentences. Until that is fixed, then this bill becomes operational and good law, Madam President. But there's also one very small issue I would raise probably in the committee stage, whether or not this bill will apply to pending charges. If a person is sentenced who is before the court currently, and then this bill is passed, whether that person will be sentenced under this particular law. And the Attorney General may address this point in the winding up. But I must say, Madam President, that firearms are clearly an issue in our country. We have to deal with it, but legislation alone cannot be the fix of the problem. You cannot just use a scare tactic against the criminals because Madam President, we can increase the fines to 100 years or $1 million fine, but the criminals will still have guns in this country. We do not manufacture firearms. So therefore, the vessels that the minister said that we have earlier on, put them to work, resource the Coast Guard, so that, Madam President, we can stop the importation of weapons and ammunition into our country. Trinidad and Tobago is a very beautiful place, Madam President, but the criminals are destroying the fabric of our nation. And it is time that we as a country and we as a parliament take back our country from the criminals, Madam President, and remove the firearms, remove the gangs, remove the ammunitions from Trinidad and Tobago, Madam President. It is time we do that. But I'm submitting that this government must do the work that is necessary. Thank you very much.
Thompson-Ahye.
President. This morning I was awakened by the sound of birds chirping outside my window. I looked outside and admired the beautiful splendor of the flamboyant flowers standing amidst a freshly cut grass. Thank you, CPEP. It was indeed a picturesque sight. Brother Valentino was indeed right. Trinidad is nice. Trinidad is a paradise. Just about a month ago, I'd come from Milan and was passing through Frankfurt. I was about to get an aircraft to go to Panama, which was the last leg of my journey, going home. The security officer collected my passport, and instead of returning it to me, he took it to his fellow security officer. They scrutinized it, and he returned it to me smiling. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Home." He said, "You are going to paradise." Trinidad is nice. Trinidad is a paradise. You know, sometimes I wonder, is Trinidad really a paradise, or have we lost our innocence? When I lived elsewhere, I would say at times, sometimes I witnessed something that could never happen here. I remember on a Friday afternoon, I was in a bank crowded with people, and there was a loud telephone cell conversation going on behind my back, and it went something like this. "Mary, I want you to put aside 2 stoves for them custom gal. I promised them that. Make sure you don't sell the one with the black on top and the brown. That is for them girls. You treat me real good." This is a country where there's no personal income tax, and they depend on customs and so on for their economy. And I thought that such a brazen advertisement as I saw it of criminality could never happen here. Fast forward to a couple of years in Trinidad and Tobago, a very public place, and this conversation was overheard. A feather for them police, yes? Me too, boy. 2 youths talking. They're getting too greedy. I find they're overdoing it. Long time they used to say, "Give me a little $5,000 or $10,000, and we will say we find the guns in the bushes." Now they want real big money. I real fed up. But boy, what we could do is either we pay or it's jail. One of them even asked me to get a gun for him, you know. Trinidad is nice. Trinidad is a paradise. But all is not lost. For Gary, not Gary Sobers, you know, but Griffith says he's monitoring the situation. I pray for our commissioner. I think he has the most difficult job in this country. And I welcome the use, his intended use of polygraph tests. We need it, because sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between who are the criminals and who are upholding the law. But not all police are bad cops, you know. Some are trying their best. I had occasion to visit a police station.
Senator Thompson-Ahye, I know it is may I just? I know it's early in your presentation, but I'm asking you to come quickly to the bill at hand, please, the matter that we're dealing with.
Having regard to being so late in the speaking order, I anticipated that it would be difficult for me not to fall into the potholes of tedious reputation and not being relevant. But I intend to tie up the scenario as quickly as possible to the bill. Now, the police officer was complaining that he was trying to uphold the law, and in fact, he had been transferred, and he said he didn't realize that the person he was complaining about, the junior officer, had a senior officer who was his uncle. So part of the problem is nepotism. So today, we are looking at the Firearms Bill. And I see the link between the Firearms Bill and the Gang Act, the Anti-Gang Act, the Bail Act, and the debate of a bill that I'm looking anxiously forward to, but it keeps getting pushed back. That is the Evidence Amendment Act. Now, my theory is that crime is not going to disappear when you pass this legislation. Because to me, you lock away one set of criminals, and as Stalin would say, more come, more come. Now, in an article written by the Family Court Review, Finelli, a student who would have graduated last month from Hofstra, talked about slash, shoot, kill, gang recruitment of children and the penalties gang face. And he related the story of an 8-year-old boy who was a gang member and who at 11 years, he had committed a number of crimes. He was subsequently killed. And the police officer was saying that gang leaders are responsible for recruiting such youths. And at the end of the day, when the youths are killed, they roam free. So, Madam President, adults recruit children into crime. Big crimes and small crimes. And many times, these adults remain outside of the system and they are not being locked up. And we have incidents of a report being made that the boys were complaining that they, in fact, received money from working on the life sport program, and they had to pay back some of it right away to the person who had transferred the money. So I am pleased that the Firearms Bill makes a provision which recognizes and treats with criminalization of youths by the adults. Clause 5 of the bill amends Section 9(2) such that a person who purchases or acquires from, sells or transfers a firearm or ammunition to, or repairs or tests or prove any firearm or ammunition for any other person whom he knows or has reasonable cause to believe to be under the age of 25 years is liable on summary conviction for a first offense to a fine of $500,000 and to imprisonment for 10 years, or on conviction on indictment of a second offense to imprisonment for 25 years, or for a third or subsequent offense to imprisonment for the remainder of his natural life. Now, I mean, you would have seen that I would have changed around the wording of the bill. I thought it was easier to follow when you put the offense and then the penalties. So I am pleased that there is such a provision, because we have a question of transferring to a person under the age of 25 years And transferring, when you look at the definition, it includes let. And I would have spoken in another debate about someone who rented a gun from a gun runner in Tenapuna, paid $5, and committed an armed robbery. And in fact, although there was a signed confession, the police never went to investigate that particular crime of renting the gun to an 18-year-old boy. So the fact that the legislation mentioned 25 years old, I'm particularly pleased because it is only like the motor vehicle legislation and the insurance industry that recognizes what the neurosurgeons have been telling us, that it is only when you reach 25 years of age that that brain becomes fully mature. And of course, well, the Constitution gives us a criterion to become a senator that one must be at least 25 years of age. So Senator Hosein seems to have a lucky escape. But my proposal, though, in respect of that clause, is that the person under the age of 25 years, that particular provision where you have to wait for the second offense for the perpetrator to be subjected to a term of imprisonment of 25 years. So I would recommend that that particular section be excised from Section 9(1)(c) in Clause 5, and a separate provision made in respect of a 25-year-old so that the monetary penalty on summary conviction is increased to $750,000 and imprisonment for 20 years. I feel that strongly about the corruption of a child or young adult. Now, Madam President, in several clauses of the bill, the phrase "for the remainder of his natural life" occurs. We see it in Clause 5, in Clause 3 amending Clause 6, in Clause 5 amending Section 9, subsection 1 and 2, in Clause 6, which added a new Section 9A, and in that new section, it appears in subsection 2. The term is included in Clause 9, amending Section 12(1), in Clause 14, which amends Section 15(3)(a) and b, and in Clause 24, amending Section 31(a) and c. Now, I don't know if the Attorney General has considered that this newfound predilection for a non-fixed term of imprisonment, but in fact advocates death in prison, can be construed as an admission that there is no rehabilitation going on in the prison system, or an indication of his belief that some persons are beyond redemption, which is a principle or a premise that I reject. Even scientific research has shown that brain surgery can help the sociopath. And I wish to share a story, Can a Leopard Change Its Spots?, which appeared in the Winnipeg Free Press. And it was about a young founder and vice president of a gang. And he went to a police officer's home. And the police saw the police officer and he said, "I know you. You ever work in homicide?" And the police officer said he felt a surge of apprehension and fear, because that is one thing that a police officer doesn't want. His worst nightmare is to see someone whom he has interacted with as a convict in his yard. And he says, "Our homes are our sanctuaries, our place to relax and escape all the madness a career in law enforcement entails. And it's also a place where people we love reside." As a result, police officers go the extra mile, and prison officers as well, to keep their addresses out of the hands of the criminal element, because their families and themselves will be at risk. And then he remembered that this TM and the big gang warfare that occurred in the street, where the person himself, TM, whom he remembered finally, was stabbed in his abdomen, somebody had been killed. But here is someone now whom his boss was saying he was a dependable employee. And he was in the police officer's yard to mend a water main. And even though the banks rejected him as a high risk to get a loan for a car, his boss had signed for him to get that car. And it's that car that transported every morning all of the workers to the work site. to ensure that they were there at 7 a.m. sharp. And the police officer said by the time that job was completed, he was in such admiration of the work ethic of this person, the discipline and easygoing, pleasant nature. And he was even surprised to see he was actually pursuing a career in stand-up comedy and had done several gigs. In 1999, I remember attending the 100th anniversary celebration of the first juvenile court. The first juvenile court was started in Chicago in 1899. And there was a production we had of a number of people who had changed their lives around, Madam President, after going through the system as a prisoner. I believe Ella Fitzgerald is one such person. So I'm asking that wherever the sentences which read for the rest of your natural life occurs, as I said before, that should be expunged from the bill. Where there is life, there is hope. As someone who is an advocate of a graduate who has a graduate degree and as a licensed trainer in restorative justice, I'm a merchant of hope and cannot subscribe to that philosophy of despair. So, Madam President, a wise black man, W.E.B. Du Bois, said, the chief problem in any country cursed with crime is not so much the punishment of criminals, but the preventing of the young from being trained to crime. So, are we really going to be training people to crime? Is this bill going to prevent crime in our society? And I would say that this bill could easily have a short title, Increasing Penalties to Decrease Crime. That's what it's about. But if we all accept that we have a gang culture in Trinidad and Tobago, and many crimes are committed by gangs, and that gang recruitment is a problem in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to look to see why children join gangs, why people join gangs. And Finelli, in his article I referred to earlier, referred to a number of reasons for gang recruitment. Adolescent extreme vulnerability, peer pressure, which substantially affects their decision-making. And when you examine the Anti-Gang Act, which I know is not before us now, but it is linked to what is happening here in this bill, the element of coercion is absent from Section 14.2, although it occurs in Section 7. It appears there. And I would suggest that we go back there and try to synchronize that, because coercion is one of the ways that people get into gangs. It is just not recruit, and the recruitment does not, in fact, the definition of recruit does not include coercion. So we need to look at that. We know that there's a desire for family, desire for protection, at certain risk factors like living in a single-parent household. We know that living with an adult who is not a parent, when you read in newspapers, a lot of them living with their grandmothers, sometimes even friends.
Senator Thompson-Ahye, may I just ask you to be reminded of my earlier, what I earlier said to you, to try and tie in what you're saying to the bill, because we are not debating the anti-gang bill. We are dealing with the firearms bill, so you need to tighten your points, please.
So that the firearms bill that we're dealing with, we're dealing with people who are using firearms, who are trafficking in firearms. And when we're dealing with gangs, the weapon of choice is the firearm, and that's the link. The weapons of choice are guns, and that is being used. And the recruitment of minors into the gang culture, there are initiation rites. And those initiation rites, to prove that you're worthy of being a gang member, to prove that you can be trusted, is frequently the use of a firearm. So sometimes we see someone or we read of someone being killed and the person is not involved in any criminality. It may very well be that this random killing was simply an initiation exercise. You have to kill someone to prove that you're tough, that you can, in fact, be a member of the gang. And that is why when we're looking at initiation, we're looking also at the use of the gun to kill someone. Because what the young people talk about outside, and I was very surprised, I learned a new term, they talk about how many ghosts that they're mining. So when they actually kill someone, because of that sense of hopelessness, they want the gang to be their family. The people that they have killed have become ghosts. They're ghosts. And in fact, people are crying every day and they are suffering because sometimes we do not make the link about what is happening in society, and sometimes we cannot understand what is happening. So that we are looking at a number of situations where children are being used, when we have a situation where adults are using children, and the penalties that we impose, the way of dealing with it doesn't always capture the people whom we want to target. Because a number of the times we look at the children and we do not look at what is behind the children. Even how we use the Children's Authority Act, that has to be linked with what we're doing in terms of our gang culture, in terms of children who are at risk, Madam President, because when we see children at risk, we do not think of taking them to the authority because we think about their material circumstances, but not their moral endangerment. This bill, as I see it, is also linked with the question of radicalization and terrorism. Because, again, the weapon of choice is very frequently, the gun. So we ought to look to see how we are going to be treating with terrorists and understand that counter-terrorism, while we're looking at it, we should also be looking at counter-radicalization. We ought to be looking at what radicalization look like, look at it as an iceberg, as it has been said by some writers, and what we've seen at the top is the terrorists, but what is below, what is there festering, is the people who have similar problems, but they have not yet become radicalized, so we ought to try our best to assist as far as possible in the social conditions, the political situation that, in fact, drive people to crime. So just bringing the penalties for having guns and using guns is not enough. We ought to look to see what we can do in terms of our social conditions, what we can do to make people feel that in this country they are valued and that their social problems are being attended to. So, Madam President, I would ask the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security, in looking at going forward with this bill, to look again at the links that they must make with the anti-gang legislation, look at how we are dealing with counterterrorism, look at how we're dealing with the Bail Act and how we're going forward with the Evidence Amendment Act, because all of these are linked. All of these are linked in that, you want to call it a smorgasbord, or our, a band of legislation that we want to put forward that we hope will address crime. Tie that again also with the education system and our social system, because many times people are dying and that hopelessness is coming. A number of people last week, or Friday, went home crying. I received a call 2 days before the common entrance exam, and I was asked to pray. Pray for those people who are going to get the results that they would not like. And I was reminded that last year, a boy in a school was told by his father, I paid all that money for lessons, that's where he passed for, and he drove and left him there in the schoolyard. And he had to call his sister to take him home.
Senator Thompson-Ahye, I think I understand the point that you're making, and you've actually made the point. And therefore, in making further points, you need to tie it in specifically to the bill, please. Okay?
Thank you, Madam President. So I am asking that we look very carefully about how we target, whom we target, and how we go forward to make a better society where we are not producing radicals who will then become terrorists and destroy our nation. Trinidad really can be nice. Trinidad can be a paradise. Thank you.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, crime is one of the issues that affects all citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. The fear of crime, the perception of crime, these strike at the heart and the core of our being as a society. Unfortunately, Madam President, crime is being utilized as a political football. And there are also those that seek to fearmonger and scare law-abiding citizens in our population about crime and the effects of crime. And they are utilizing crime as a tool to achieve political mileage. Madam President, I use the opportunity to place on the Hansard in this House the government's position with respect to this dilemma that we as a country, we as citizens face. The government, this administration, has always been concerned with crime and the levels of crime that we face as a society. Madam President, for the record, I have been the Minister of National Security since the 6th of August last year, just a few days shy of 11 months, and have been working tirelessly to tackle in meaningful manners the ills of crime and the actions of the criminal elements in our society. One of the first things that we did as an administration was seek to appoint a commissioner of police. We've had this conversation before, both here and in the other place, and it is a relevant conversation. Fortunately for the country, we were able to appoint a permanent commissioner of police, and he too took office in August of last year. Madam President, it is not up to the individuals to tackle in those offices, the Minister of National Security, the Commissioner of Police, to tackle crime alone. However, with the appointment of a permanent Commissioner of Police, immediately our society and our country began to see the effects of that, along with some other combined elements that are tied to firearms and that are tied to getting the scourge of firearms and illegal firearms off our street and how we've tackled crime. Madam President, one of the most important pillars is leadership. And we saw that as an administration. And I'd like to take this opportunity to just point out a couple of the other key players in the fight against crime, and in particular, how we have been tackling illegal firearms within our borders.
The Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force plays an extremely important supporting role to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Because you see, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is the body constitutionally charged with the responsibility of protecting and serving us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, of detecting crime, trying to prevent crime, investigating crime and prosecuting crime, bringing criminal charges, laying charges. That can't be done by the Defense Force. It can't be done by any government minister. It can't be done by any citizen, save for a citizen's arrest, which is not part of how you tackle the scourge of illegal firearms. Our intelligence services are those men and women in our intelligence services have been doing a tremendous job. And I take the opportunity today to thank the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and our intelligence services for the support role and the key and critical work that they have been doing along with the police service. And I utilize this as an opportunity, Madam President, to thank the former Chief of Defense Staff, Rear Admiral Hayden Pritchard, as well as our former Director of our intelligence services, the SSA, to make this point. Upon the appointment of a Commissioner of Police, Mr. Griffith, we as an administration then saw the opportunity for us to provide some other pillars in these key positions. The appointment of the new Chief of Defense Staff, a young man, someone we wanted to give some length of tenure. Because you see, you can't put somebody in office and then they leave office shortly thereafter, in particular a key office like this. So we chose a young person, vibrant, coming from an intelligence background, someone who had worked in SWOT before, someone respected by his peers, someone who knows how to get the job done. Put him in as the Chief of Defense Staff. We chose a director of the SSA, albeit currently in an acting role, but a tremendous job that he's doing. And the key and critical binding of these three key offices in the fight against crime, and in particular, as I'll get to, how we've tackled illegal firearms. All three of these gentlemen served in the Defense Force and came from the same batch. What that means, Madam President, to the population is these three gentlemen joined our Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force at the same time, and from the word go, have that bond. Just those key strategic decisions as to who we put in post have made a significant improvement in the ability of the governments and the people's, because it's not the government fighting crime alone, but the people's ability to have those key office holders de-silo information, de-silo intelligence, and provide the impetus necessary in the fight against crime. The implementation of at least once a week heads of security meetings where I have the police service, the defense force, the prison service, TOCU, our intelligence services, and, depending on the topics we're dealing with, immigration and fire services. Those meetings have as well, and the change of the structure of those meetings, Madam President, I can tell the country, I no longer accept just come with a cut and paste from last week and provide us with updated information from last week. No, it is critical analysis, critical policy decisions, critical determination of all of us sitting at the table, how operations should be conducted, what should be targeted, how gangs should be targeted, how we should tackle the scourge of illegal firearms, how borders should be made safer. What are the assets available? Because you see, Madam Speaker, there is no ability to just go and pull off of a shelf OPVs or fast patrol vessels. They also cost a tremendous amount of money. But what we will do in the meantime is work with what we have. Work with the radar system. I went and saw the radar system 2 Fridays ago. The radar system is up and running. The work that is going to be done. These are some of the elements that are helping us in tackling the illegal firearms coming in. You see, because the borders were open. Undoubtedly, the borders were open. When we came in as an administration, and I asked about the use of interceptors. Interceptors are the small, fast craft utilized to get to the gun runners, to get to the persons bringing in the illegal firearms by boats into our country. I was shocked to hear that they too had been allowed to deteriorate and were no longer working. Initially, they came, this is the Coast Guard, with a proposal to the taxpayers of $63 million to
to buy new interceptors. And Madam President, as the Minister of National Security, I sent them back and I said, unacceptable. I said, first of all, we need to know as taxpayers how many interceptors are there, what work needs to be done to get those interceptors back up and running. And I'm happy to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that simple but strategic decision took us down from $63 million for I think it was 3 or 4 new interceptors to a figure of $7 million to repair 14 interceptors. 14 interceptors that will help us in the fight against illegal firearms entering the country. And that is how we have been doing business under this administration. Because you see, Madam President, it is not about the giving of contracts. It is not about what kickback one can get from a contract. It is about delivering value for money for the taxpayers in times of little. Another key plank, engaging our foreign partners. That has been one of the key pillars of this administration from the time we came in. We got significant assistance in training, technical assistance, the networking, the provision of intelligence from all of the major intelligence agencies that we need for this part of the world and this hemisphere. Again, that has helped us tremendously. Just working with the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms body out of the United States, they helped us reset CIRU, which is the body charged with the responsibility of testing firearms. Because you see, as I said not too long ago, and I want to remind, because I heard Senator Hosein ending his debate contribution by saying about forensics and our ballistics, and I'll get to the forensics in a short while and give the real facts. What happened is the Americans had provided significant training in the testing of ballistics and the tracing of firearms to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And when we came in as an administration, one of the first things we were told by the Americans is after millions of dollars spent on that training, what happened is the former administration disbanded it and sent the police officers all over the country. Immediately we got them back together. So it is not true to be saying that the ballistics cannot be done. The ballistics are currently being done with respect to illegal firearms at the Forensic Science Center. I went and visited there very briefly last Friday. They are working. They told me, Minister, unfortunately, there seems to be this misperception, a wrong perception out there that is taking us 6, and I heard the Commissioner refer to it, that's taking 6 years to test. Yes, there is a backlog, but the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service armorers are helping us with that backlog. CIRU is back up and running. They are also helping with that. And if there is the need to prioritize any firearms case, all that needs to be done is a request made to the Forensic Science Center, and in particular the 2 or 3 officers that conduct these ballistics who are dedicated, those unnamed faces that I met with last week, who are dedicated and to be thanked for. And they said and gave their commitment they will prioritize whatever they're asked to prioritize by the Commissioner of Police. Firearms. I sat here and I listened. I listened very carefully to the contribution of Senator Thompson-Ahye, and she said some key phrases that I think properly encapsulate what you're dealing with. Because you're right. Illegal firearms are the single worst tool being used in criminality at this time, and that is what we are fighting. But I'd like to say something. There is no single piece of legislation, there is no single action that anyone can take that is going to eradicate crime. Every country in the world suffers from crime. The question is, how do we react to it? The question is not to take one bill in isolation, and in particular the Firearms Amendment bill that we're debating here today, and say, well, this can't solve crime. Obviously, in of itself, it can't solve crime. The situation is not to say, as I heard from the opposition, that, well, look, you have to fix the criminal justice system, you have to increase your detection, so don't worry with this. Come back to us when you've done all of that. Again, it must always be a multi-pronged approach. It is also not correct to suggest that this is not going to play a deterrent. Because I am telling the population through you, Madam President, this bill and the policy behind this bill came after long and hard discussion with the Commissioner of Police and Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and us sitting down and thinking, these are the issues we have. We have illegal firearms being used by the gangs, also being used by individuals who are not gang-related to commit the most heinous of offenses against people in Trinidad and Tobago. And you need to find ways to deal with that. Repeat offenders, I'll give the statistics in a short while. We have persons out there who are repeat offenders using firearms. We have shooters out there. The Commissioner of Police came out and told the population that there are shooters. And when he's questioned, well, why you don't arrest and charge, he gave the right answer. You need to move from intelligence and information to evidence. I want to ask one simple question of the population, but more importantly of the members of this august chamber, the Senate. What is a firearm designed to do? What is the purpose of a firearm? I respectfully submit the only purpose of a firearm is to kill somebody. You pull a trigger, pointing a trigger at someone else with a bullet loaded in the chamber, you are going to do serious harm to the persons you've pointed at. So if you accept that a firearm has been created, whether to protect yourself or whether to attack someone else and to cause serious harm, including death, to that person, and that is the tool that you're using, then ask this question, Madam President: why have an illegal firearm? And why would criminals have illegal firearms? And what rights do criminals have to have illegal firearms? The only reason they have illegal firearms are to protect themselves from other criminals, to commit acts of crime, robbery, murder, and other serious acts. And that is what we need to get off of the streets. So you're right. One bill is not going to solve it, but we never said one bill is going to solve it. Madam President, you have to marry this act. It is what can you in the Senate do? Because none of you in the Senate could go and instruct police, or instruct the defense force, or instruct those who have the responsibility to protect us. But what your responsibility is, what the duty, the God-given ability to us in this Senate here today is to change the law. You've looked at the bail amendment. When I was here dealing with the bail amendment not too long ago, Madam President, we spoke about how that fits in. They're all pieces in a puzzle. And when the puzzle is built out, it's to make the people of Trinidad and Tobago safer. Anti-gang legislation, you're right. The anti-gang legislation is a part. But to give the police this tool, it does a number of things. It is going to be a massive deterrent. By taking away, now, what I want the population to understand, the citizens, through you, Madam President, is the proposed legislation is tiered. When I say tiered, what it means, first offense, what we've done for carrying, for example, an illegal firearm, being found in possession of an illegal firearm, we've increased the fine and the sentence possible for you. Because what we're facing as a reality right now, Madam President, is persons who are repeat offenders with their illegal firearms. They will go into court, they will plead guilty, because the maximum sentence right now for possession of an illegal firearm, $15,000. How could a deterrent be for anybody who's involved in criminality? Carrying the most sophisticated of firearms. This is no longer what some of us in this chamber may have grown up reading about. An old revolver, old sawn-off shotgun or homemade shotgun with a few rounds of ammunition. I am telling you all, as a Minister of National Security, the person charged with the responsibility to do what I can on behalf of the government to make it safer for us in Trinidad and Tobago. The intelligence and information I get with respect to the firearms, what I see with respect to the availability of illegal firearms out there, scares me. And it should scare every law-abiding citizen. I don't know how many of you all in here have had experience with firearms. One of the simplest but most effective handguns in the world is a handgun called the Glock. The Glock used to be a prized possession in the past for criminals. You couldn't get your hand on one. Every single, I would say 8 out of 10 criminals that we pick up now with illegal firearms are carrying a Glock. A Glock has the easiest trigger pull. A Glock, normal Glock 19 with 9mm ammunition can carry 15 rounds and one in each chamber. That's 16. These criminals have extended magazines, 33 rounds. The damage you can do with that, and you can convert it very easily into automatic. And every little criminal out there is carrying this now, with as much ammunition as they need. We talked about legal firearms and firearm users license. It is this Commissioner of Police who increased it from 25 rounds to 40. And I want to answer Senator Hussain. One of the first priorities that the Commissioner of Police put when he came into office, this Commissioner of Police, was dealing with the backlog of applications for firearm users license. No one has a right to carry a firearm in Trinidad and Tobago. And he, along with the men and women in that department, are doing what they can, and they have been dealing with the backlog. The point I make is understand, if you can, the importance that you are playing today in changing the landscape by going ahead with this firearm amendment. We need to send a strong signal to the criminals. By definition, these criminals who are carrying illegal firearms do not care about the law. They know, as I just told you, $15,000 fine is the maximum. The magistrates right now, $3,000 if they plead guilty, $4,000 if they plead guilty. You lose a firearm, you pick up another one, and you come back out. That is why we went with a tiered system, colleagues. First offense, we've increased it now, $250,000 in 10 years. That in itself is a deterrent, because they now have to face that from a maximum fine of $15,000 now to $250,000. When this law is applied, it is going to make them stop in their tracks. I guarantee it. But what we've done is we've gone further. And I sat down and thought about this and went to the Prime Minister and the Attorney General. And initially, they didn't give me a green light to go ahead. But when I spoke the way I'm speaking to you now, and they understood what it is we're dealing with, they said, run hard and get it done. Second offense, we're increasing it to $500,000. Sorry. The second offense, so we're saying you come back as a repeat offender, we hold you with an illegal firearm again, is now conviction. We've increased it, and we're now saying 20 years in some instances, and we've taken away the fine. So I heard the submissions being made that what you're going to do is you're going to put persons in prison and they languish in prison. I agree with you that there is an opportunity to rehabilitate, and I'll get to that and the work that we're doing. But you have to send a strong signal. So the second offender now, you can't be fined. So you now know I can't just go to magistrate's court, plead guilty as I did last week, pay now a $6,000 fine and go back out, pick up another gun and do worse. You now know that the only sentence is go and spend time in prison. And I've heard you all say, I've heard persons suggest like life, natural life, is not proportional, it's too much, a person will languish in prison, etc. Two things. There is provision in law that even when you're serving a death penalty, a death sentence for murder or life imprisonment or natural life, there is provision that if you have been rehabilitated, there's something called a mercy committee. And you can write to the mercy committee and ask that you be released on time. And part of that process, because I'm now in charge of it, is we get the reports, we ask the prison officers, we ask persons in society, etc. And that committee works. So if someone has been rehabilitated, good. But let me tell you all something, with the greatest of respect through you, Madam President. The persons using these illegal firearms, and I read this morning in the newspapers, Senior Counsel Senator Choate saying she was a victim of 2 illegal firearm-related crimes. You stare down the barrel of a firearm, you have somebody shoot at you, you run the risk of having been told that there are death threats against you, persons are out to get you with illegal firearms, or you see somebody being robbed with an illegal firearm. This responsibility now lies with you all here today to send the strongest possible signal to those criminals out there that we as a society, through us in this house, because it's only you all in this place and the other place who have the opportunity to change the law. And I am asking you to send the strongest possible signal to those people out there that we as a society are fed up. We as legislators are fed up of what we're seeing happening. I have it last week outside of my constituency office, literally between me and where Senator Thompson-Ahye is sitting now. Yet again, another young man murdered by the use of an illegal firearm outside my constituency office. This is a reality. We see it. We see every day in the newspapers. Over the weekend, they're working with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We had a good level. I don't get into the statistics. The last day of the month, Sunday, the 30th, 3 murders. I read in the newspaper, but I got it in a report before. 30-something spent shells at a crime scene. And you have the opportunity today to send a signal to these criminals that we as a society will not accept it anymore. Because there is nothing, no single initiative, no single piece of legislation, even multiple legislation, that is going to solve it all overnight. But I tell you something, you have the opportunity to be part of history and pass landmark legislation, sending a signal that it is not acceptable, and this is our pushback at crime. And I give you the assurance that under my leadership and the support of my cabinet colleagues, we are working hard with those charged with the responsibility, the police, the defense force, and I listened to it. I listened to all the old talk. And one of the members of the independent bench said on the last occasion that I listened, you don't want to hear tit for tat. I agree with you, because the past does nothing to help us now and take us forward into the future. This legislation today is the present, and it will help us going into the future. Let me give you all some statistics, if I may, through you, Madam President, because you see, every day I get the crime statistics. This one is yesterday. So when I met with the heads yesterday, this is some of what we discussed, as well as how we're dealing with gangs, as well as how we're going to deal with some of the migrant positions and situations we have in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to share, Madam President, through you, to the population, what I think are some very important statistics today. Firearms and ammunition found and seized. Because one would believe, listening to some of the contributions, that nothing is happening. And there's no work being done and no real struggle and no success being had by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Excuse. Firearms and ammunition found and seized between the 1st of January to the 1st of July. A comparison between 2018 and 2019. This is only what we found and seized, which is a proportion, a percentage of what exists out there, what any one of us could face when we leave the safety and security of the Parliament on a daily basis. In 2018, we found and seized, for the same period, 1st of January to 1st of July, 535 illegal firearms. Remembering that every firearm is designed to kill somebody. We seized, in 2019, the comparable period, 383. A difference of 28.4%. Some may say that we're being less effective. I don't think so. I think what we have managed to do is some of the work we've done, including at our legal ports, at PRCO, the legal seaports. We've locked down a lot of the former entryways of illegal firearms coming into Trinidad. Because what we're aiming to do is make it a scarce commodity again. Ammunition, and this is what frightens me. A legal firearm user with a license to carry a firearm is allowed 40 rounds of ammunition. 40. That is what the Commissioner of Police, it used to be 25. The Commissioner of Police has determined that that is sufficient to protect yourself. We seized in 2018, for half of the year, 9,012 rounds of ammunition. This year, we've seized 4,798 rounds of ammunition. It is a war taking place out there. Don't fool yourselves for 1 second believing, as we sit in towers and look down, that it is not a war going on out there. It is literally a war going on out there, and we must not allow our society to become like our brothers and sisters in Jamaica, where they have lockdown places that law enforcement can't go. I refuse to allow that once I have any responsibility, in whatever role I can to play, be it a simple legislator. Another scary set of statistics, murder by motive. Everybody likes to talk about murder. What we do is we analyze the motive behind the murders. So from the 1st of January to the 1st of July 2019, we've had 255 murders. 255, too much. 75 of those were gang-related. 42 were based on revenge, which is also gang-related. 34 based on drug activity, also gang-related. You add those three, that's a total of 151 out of 255. Then we have another category called altercation. Altercation as well, use of illegal firearms, we'll get to 32. So you add that, it's 183 out of the 255 murders in this category of persons we're dealing with outside there. They have no value for life. I have witnessed it on my walks in my constituency in East Port of Spain. I remember once helping an old lady from a car up the, whoever knows East Port of Spain, very narrow lanes, so cars can't go up in all of the areas, helping her up to the house. And as I walked back down the hill, a young man running up towards me, and as he lifted his T-shirt, firearm tucked right there. Everybody in some of these areas has illegal firearms. We have to, as our responsibility is to put a stop. Let them think, if I'm caught with this illegal firearm, what are the consequences? The consequences should no longer be, go down to magistrate's court, plead guilty, $3,000, and you're back out again. Consequences should be, especially with the repeat offenders, because we all make mistakes. I agree with you. You make the mistake once, it's a mistake. You make it twice, maybe it's a mistake. Three times, that's your life choice. That's what you determine you want to carry. This is the third offense of carrying an illegal firearm. Weapons used in the commission of murder. This is the statistic I want you all to digest and for the population to hear. Weapons used in the commission of murders, 1st of January 2019 to the 1st of July 2019. I told you with the 255 murders, 207 murders committed with the use of illegal firearms. Out of 255 murders for the year, 207 committed with illegal firearms. In the face of that statistic, knowing that how many illegal firearms are out there and the availability and access and persons being repeat offenders, I'll give you the statistics on that just now. 255 murders, 207 use of firearms. And someone would tell us we don't have a responsibility to support this type of legislation, to send the strongest possible message to those criminals out there. The next highest was sharp instruments, 26. So of 255 murders, 207 were committed using firearms. Therefore, firearms were used to commit 81.2% of the murders to date. 81.2% of the murders committed in Trinidad and Tobago to date. This year alone, 6 months we've just completed, illegal firearms. This is the reality. Serious crimes. Total serious crimes for the year 2018, for half of the year, the equivalent period last year, 6,917. This year, 6,003. But these are the ones I'd like to draw to your attention, colleagues. Woundings with firearms and other weapons and shootings with firearms. For 2018, for half of the year, 403 reported incidents, because everybody would have read in the newspapers. Some of us may be unfortunate enough to have experienced it. You hear the sound of gunfire that is no longer pop, pop, pop. It's now rapid gunfire because they have sophisticated firearms, and those will not be reported. So for the year to date, 1st of January to 29th of June, 351 serious reported crimes of woundings. These are people wounded but not killed with firearms. Add that to the murder rate. Possession of firearm and ammunition, 509 for the year compared to 685 last year. The work that has been done because I heard it being suggested. You have to detect, you have to arrest, you have to charge. Agreed. But we have to give the police and the men and women who put their lives at risk every single day to protect ours, we have to give them the tools. The tools are not simply a bulletproof vest, a better firearm, a new motor vehicle, better technology, because it becomes frustrating. You put yourselves in the position of some of these police officers, especially the ones who work in the intelligence and do their job properly. You pick up Mr. X today with an illegal firearm, charge him. By Wednesday, he's out, $3,000, he's pled guilty, go down the road, he laughs at you. You pick him up again next week, same thing. You pick him up 2 weeks down the road, same thing. Why pick him up the fourth time? What is your responsibility? What is our responsibility? It is to provide them with the tool of what we have before you. Second offense, no fine, stay in jail. Third offense, natural life imprisonment. Send the signal. Persons arrested and charged from the 1st of January to the 29th of January 2019, possession of firearms, 619 people. 619 people charged for half of the year with possession of illegal firearms and ammunition. Those are some of the statistics, colleagues, that I wanted to share with you all. Firearms seized and found for the periods 2013 to 2019. 2013, the police found and seized 465. 2014, 585. 2015, 691. 2016, 765. 2017, 1,064. 2018, 988. Total firearm offenders and repeat firearm offenders. And this is what this legislation, part of it, is designed to tackle, the repeat offenders, because they are repeat offenders. It is the same gang
Minister,
members, the same criminal.
You have 5 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Same gang members and criminal element picking up these illegal firearms and using it. You know, sometimes I wonder as I sit in these meetings and go through the briefings and we plan exercises and operations and decide how to assist the society and how to assist the men and women in police service. Yesterday, at my weekly meeting, without getting into detail, one of the scourges we're dealing with right now is prostitution and young girls from Venezuela being forced into prostitution and human trafficking and whatever is the most derogatory of term you can use to describe a human being, use that term. Because I use colorful language, but I can't use it here. And use that term and think of these men. So yesterday, over the weekend, based on intelligence, we picked up some of them. And I am determined, and I've told the persons under my responsibility, I don't want the women, you know, because they're the victims. We must help them. I want the heads, the people who are doing this. And that is what we're building out right now. But they use illegal firearms. And when I sat in that meeting and the police officers were describing to me the statements taken from these young women and the beatings that they got from these animals with the illegal firearms, etc., who keep them in check to carry out their work and bring them back in and make money off of them. I said, thank God I was blessed with the opportunity to work on legislation to try and help Trinidad and Tobago, and that is what I will do whilst I can. Total firearm offenders, repeat firearm offenders for 2013 to 2018, 4,215 offenders. Out of that, 202 were repeat offenders. 44 of them reoffended within 1 year, and 158 repeat offenders. They laugh at us, because if you know the maximum fine for possession of an illegal firearm is $15,000, that's a joke. Another, as I'm about to wrap up, let me get it quickly. It shocked the Attorney General and myself to learn that up to this point, there is not a specific criminal offense for trafficking in firearms. Send a strong signal. You're held with 2 firearms. You shouldn't even have 1 illegal. You're held with more than 1. You're trafficking in firearms. The police asked for that specific offense because they're facing it. This is not the wild, wild west, as I saw one of the newspapers suggest the other day, but they're operating like that. I've told you all previously the number of murders where firearms were used, the percentage of murders and the use of firearms, if I may very quickly say. 2013, 78% of murders, illegal firearms. 2014, 75%. 2015, 81%. 2016, 76%. 2017, 76%. 2018, 80%. Colleagues, you have been given the opportunity to sit in this house and do what you can. Because you can't go in a police car and you can't go and run down the criminals. You can't do any of that. But what you could do today is send the strongest possible signal on behalf of the citizens, the law-abiding and civic-minded citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, that we are fed up of illegal firearms and the scourge it's playing in our society. And this is your response. As a piece, it is only a piece of the puzzle. We are working on others. I ask respectfully that you give that consideration, because that is the responsibility that each and every one of you all bear today, to assist the men and women who are charged with the responsibility of fighting the criminal element out there, and fight them we will. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Haynes.
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity to join in this debate. As I enter this debate, I think we're at the point right now as a Senate and as a nation where we are very clear that crime is an issue, if not the most major issue facing our nation today. And perhaps it is our existence as a Senate where what comes before us is always legislation, that the debate always hinges on legislation not being the solution-oriented approach that we hope to see. So in preparation for the debate today, Madam President, I went through as much information as was available to me that would have been presented by the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of the Attorney General, as well as other stakeholders identified by the government in what was billed as their whole-of-government approach to crime. Because, Madam President, what we're trying to do today, well, what we've been told by the Minister of National Security, by the Attorney General, is that this firearms amendment bill, by increasing penalties, will provide the nation with decreasing crime numbers and decreasing numbers of firearm-related offenses, in particular the one that troubles us the most being murders. And there's an issue with that justification for me, and I'll get into that a little later. But I listened to the Minister of National Security, who gave us a plea to do our part to assist in whatever crime-fighting measure the government brings to the Parliament, because that's where we get our space to assist. And I hope that as the Minister pleaded with us, that the Minister takes the time to listen to what our contributions have been here time and time and time again, which is that legislation keeps coming before us to increase penalties, to increase fines, to reduce bail, and they keep coming. And they have not been working, Madam President. They have not been working. So we are not here to provide an obstruction to a solution to our crime scourge. What we're trying to do is say, listen, everybody in this house agrees 100% that crime is a problem. What we're saying is what you're providing us with as the solution, it has not been working. So perhaps listen to the other things that we are suggesting. Listen to all of these other things and do some of those, and then we'll see results. And Madam President, I listened very attentively to the Minister of National Security. And I hoped, it would be easier, I think, to get public buy-in parliamentary buy-in on pieces of legislation, if when the government comes to us to ask for our support, that they itemize very carefully, in a very detailed manner, all of the other interventions. Now, I know somebody's going to get up and say that there needs to be some level of secrecy and stealth with respect to crime fighting. That aside. But, Madam President, what I looked at in the first instance was, as an opposition party, recognizing the problem as it was then, prior to 2015, with crime numbers circling around that 400 mark, and that being deemed as unacceptable, even by the People's Partnership, Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led administration, understanding that those numbers were unacceptable. What did the PNM opposition promise that they would do when they came into power? Now, because we've had so many crime debates, one after the other, I am not certain if it was in the firearms debate or in another one, where someone said, well, you know, you guys keep saying that we don't have this plan to deal with it, and we keep giving you these elements, but if you look at our manifesto, you'll get the plan. So, I'm a fair person, Madam President. I looked at the manifesto. At first, I looked at the manifesto in the first instance to see at what point in time did the PNM, as an opposition, say to the population that their targeted solutions to our crime problem would be legislation. Because that's all that's coming. That is all that we've been seeing. You look at the newspaper reports, you look at interviews by the Minister of National Security, you look at interviews by the Attorney General. What we're being told is, look at these pieces of legislation that we've brought. Look at what we've done. This is what we're doing for you. This is what will reduce the crime situation. So I looked for, at what point in the PNM manifesto was the legislation going to be the central arm of their crime-fighting interventions? It's not mentioned, Madam President. In the PNM manifesto of 2015, national security is covered on pages 23, 24, and 25. And what I found particularly amusing, Madam President, and I'm going to just, because of the nature of this debate, I'm going to go through what they promised, what they hope to accomplish with this legislation. I would also like, with your permission, Madam President, because I too heard the cries of Senator Dylan Remy, where as we move forward and we move towards Trinidad and Tobago in the future, I too would like to put an end to this, what was done, what wasn't done, and look at what are the solutions to our gun problem. And I focus specifically on problems with illegal firearms and gun-related crimes in various jurisdictions, and to see what can we put forward to perhaps help, and if the government would be willing to say what in these areas are being done, then we may feel a little more comfortable to say that this is just one cog in the wheel, because as it stands, what they're telling us is this is the whole wheel, Madam President. So I looked at the PNM manifesto, and the first thing that they spoke about was the whole of government approach. And I would, with your permission, like to quote just a small piece, because I thought this was very important. PNM as an opposition noted that the police and their partners, noting local government, the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Planning, and the Fire Services, and other people-centered organizations, will provide the community security and safety surveillance, and that the CSP will address the following: drug and alcohol abuse, local crime, reoffending, crime prevention through environmental design. And For maximum efficiency, the police service will be strengthened at all levels with the establishment of an appropriate police management agency, which would do, among other things, increase leadership and hold accountability and develop the workforce, the police service workforce. Madam President, in a series of other debates, and as we led up to this now Firearms Amendment bill, we have raised, members on the opposition bench, members on the independent bench, members in civil society, have raised time and time again the need for a community-oriented approach as a solution to our crime scourge. We have said time and time again that if you focus here, you will see results. So as I went through this, and it's been a while since I looked at this manifesto document from the PNM, is that they know it too, Madam President. They had the answer prior to getting into government. They understood then that a community-oriented approach and not legislation would give us the desired results.
Anita Haynes, I have allowed you some time to develop your presentation, but you're spending a lot of time on developing the presentation. I need you to come to make your points a little faster and to make it in the context of the bill at hand, and to remind you that there have been other speakers before you who have basically set out certain principles already.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you for your guidance. The reason I'm taking my time with this in particular, Madam President, it's because as the legislation comes before us, and as the Minister of National Security presented it to be a major part in this crime prevention, to deal with the crime as it is, I'm saying it was never articulated to the population that this would be the route that we would go down. It was never articulated. And I had to raise that part from the manifesto because as I get to the second piece of my presentation, which would be putting forward solutions to the same crime scourge, with the same gun-related problems that this legislation seeks to address, I am going to show you that the data that the international community has before us, and that the international community have presented to show that what is currently working in countries where a gun problem was prevalent, and they have found ways to have targeted interventions and reduction in the crime situation. It is by going to the same things that they promised and then never delivered upon, Madam President. And that is where I think a lot of the country is really exhausted with this conversation. We are tired as a population. You cannot keep bringing, and I went through the list of the pieces of legislation from the SSA Amendment Bill early on in the term of this administration, come all the way to today. And it's every year, around the same time, is the same thing. There's about 4 or 5 pieces of crime legislation to increase penalties, Madam President, just like the one before us today. Nobody comes in and says, look, these have reaped results. 2016, we did X, Y, and Z, and we saw these results. 2017, we did X, Y, and Z, and we saw these results. So it has not been working, Madam President. But the entirety of the legislation before us, the entirety of this act to amend the Firearms Act before us is to say, listen, guns are bad. People use guns to commit crime. Let's increase the penalties. And then the logic they're using is that crime will go down. The Minister of National Security made a very interesting statement. Criminals do not care about the law. And I wrote that down because if you knew that, if you know that criminals don't care about the law, but you keep passing law to increase the fines and penalties, knowing that the people you're targeting do not care, then what are we doing? See, what actual steps are we making to make our country safer and to make people in Trinidad and Tobago safer? If you know that criminals do not care about the law, and you look even at the first one, when you talk, and I heard the Attorney General talking about, by the second offense and the third offense, you deserve to spend your natural life in prison. And all of that is hinged upon, and the Minister of National Security said, well, what's the incentive for the police? And let's think about the plight of the police service. Why arrest them another time when people are laughing at us because you arrested them today and they're out tomorrow? And I listen to that, and it sounds good. Except this is about when you are convicted on the second time and convicted on the third time. And nobody sought to address the fact that we have a convictions problem. How many people?
But several speakers before you have talked about that. And you're spending a lot of your presentation on matters that have been raised before. And that's what I'm asking you, please. You can, if you want to make the points, fine, but you need to make the points succinctly and not spend as much time as you are on the points, okay?
Thank you, Madam President, again, for your guidance. I want to, Madam President, when we prepared for this debate, Senator Sobers went through a lot of the exact points of the legislation, and then Senator Hussain went through some of the constitutionality about the legislation. And so I come in third, Madam President, to look at the overarching elements of the legislation, whether or not it is a solution. So I am doing my best not to repeat points, because I'm pretty clear none of my colleagues would have raised some of these points. But I take your guidance, Madam President, and I think where the exhaustion comes in, it's because we've been talking about crime so much. We feel like we've heard all of this before. But
I just point out, there's no exhaustion on my part. I am here, and the one person who hears every contribution, rest assured, is the presiding officer. And therefore, I am very clear about which debate and which points were raised. Okay?
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that at the very least, one person is listening, because I'm pretty sure the Minister of National Security was not listening on the last occasion, because then he would have been able to bring some of the answers to the questions that we had asked initially, Madam President. I looked at a report, well, 3 academic reports, but I'll start with Strategies for Reducing Gun Violence, the Role of Gangs, Drugs, and Firearms. This is from 2007, out of Canada. The authors are George Teeter, who is an associate professor of criminology, Emily Trosinski, a research assistant, and Michelle Graves, a research assistant, who assisted with the preparation of this. Early on, Madam President, in this research paper, the authors went through pains to note identifying trends in gun violence and understanding the reasons that gun violence might be increasing, especially among gang-involved youth, and has become a priority for governments and citizens. In order to design effective gun violence reduction policies, the report provides a review of the gun violence prevention literature, which focuses heavily on efforts to reduce gun violence among gang members, which is a point that Senator Thompson-Ahye tried to make. But where this, I think, goes into really important detail is that one of the conclusions of this report stated that you cannot arrest your way out of a problem. That is, suppression, which is what this legislation seeks to do, Madam President, does not work alone. One of the key recommendations from a major study recently concluded in Los Angeles is the need for law enforcement, prosecutors, and other elements of the criminal justice system to work in concert with comprehensive community-based intervention and prevention programs, including local schools, healthcare providers, job training programs, child and parenting development, courses, and general economic development efforts. Madam President, that the literature from the international community is telling us, as a young nation, Trinidad and Tobago, that the solution that you are looking for cannot be in the legislation. It cannot be that you are looking to arrest your way out of a crime problem. And this legislation, Madam President, and the pleas of the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security is seeking to convince us as a nation that what we need to do, the solution that we are seeking, is at the end of the problem. After a crime has been committed, after you've been held with your illegal gun, after you've been held with your ammunition, after all of that, when the problem is already created, where it's already been developed, where it's already cemented, this piece of legislation comes in and says that is the solution. Let us just say, we are fed up. I think the Minister of National Security urged us to be tough on crime. And I would like, Madam President, as a person here today, to say let us be tough with crime prevention. Let us take all of this, all of these efforts, all of our resources that we're putting, all of the resources that we're going to put in maintaining persons in prison and paying for them to stay for their prison sentences, let us put that in taking targeted approaches. Madam President, and I raise that because when I went, and I just want to make the link back to the PNM manifesto, because this was raised in a similar manner under the headline, Taking Early Action in Preventing Crime. That is what they promised this nation that they would do. It was not the Firearms Amendment Bill. It was not the Bail Amendment Bill. It was none of these things. It was that they would take early action to prevent crime. And nobody from the government bench at any point in time in the last 3 years, Madam President, has ever gotten up and said, well, this is where we're at with these promises that we've made. This is how far we've gotten, and this is how far we need to go. That statement has never been made in this House, which is why we are always hard-pressed to support the legislation, because you keep telling us this is part of this wider thing, and we never hear about the wider thing, Madam President. And underneath that heading, the PNM spoke about tackling youth criminality head-on through the implementation of preventative actions and to take into account the broad range of underlying personal behaviors, including low attainment, problematic behavior, bullying, parenting, inconsistent parenting, poor mental health, domestic violence, and looking at things like the family and all the risk factors in youth offending. Madam President, I was at pains to see that what was recommended then, which has also been echoed by us as what we were hoping the government would be bringing forward, what we hoped that they would be doing, none of those things existed. But they are the things that have proven to be the solution to the problem that we're facing, not the legislation in front of us. Madam President, the Minister of National Security told us that this is our war, and we need to do things to be tough. And I understand the language, and he needs the language, right? To be tough on crime, and this is our war. And what is the firearm designed to do? But the minister also noted that every young person, every small, petty criminal has a Glock that was previously unavailable. And we need to say to them, you having this Glock, by way of this legislation, if you have this Glock, we find that to be the most abhorrent thing, and on the third occasion, you're in jail for the rest of your natural life. But Madam President, how does that deal with the problem of the Glock? Because they're still going to be very much available. And if you understand, and if you took the time to do the research necessary to understand the problem, and then present coherent and cogent solutions, you would understand taking little boy X off the street who got the Glock, I guarantee you, did not buy the Glock with his pocket change. I guarantee you, Madam President, did not bring this Glock into the country. But you take him off the stage, you lock him up for the rest of his natural life, and we still have the problem, Madam President. The problem still exists, because the problem isn't the little boy. That isn't the problem. The problem is the access to the Glock. And nobody came here to address that today. Nobody said anything about it. I mean, I heard the minister in passing talk about, border security and the OPVs, which is their comfortable position. It's a comfortable fallback position because, when you talk about a comfort blanket, a security blanket for persons who take a very infantile approach to very serious discussions, you get to the OPVs, Madam President. You get to the OPVs because from the onset, the narrative has been, there have been no OPVs, so crime skyrocketed. But nobody's provided any details around that. Nobody has said, in the last 4 years, this is what we've done. Nobody has said why in 2008, with no OPVs, crime skyrocketed. And you see, so when we talk about an infantile approach to a serious argument, is that tacked back to the OPVs. But why I brought that up, Madam President, is that would have been a critical element today in speaking for anybody from the government side to get up and say, listen, population, guns are the problem. People with illegal firearms, they are a problem for us as a society. And therefore, this is what we have done in terms of getting guns off the street. Because what we're looking at here in this bill, Madam President, is getting people off the street. People are coming off the street. But what are we doing about getting guns off the street? What are we doing about gun and gang culture? What are we talking about? And I know somebody from the government bench is going to say, well, are you telling us not to do this?
Senator Haynes, focus on your presentation. Don't anticipate what others will be saying.
Yes,
okay?
Madam President. That if we don't do this bit, are you to suggest that this piece must come first? This is the piece of the puzzle that must come first. And that is a logical fallacy to suggest that coming at the end of it should be the piece of the puzzle that comes first, Madam President. When I looked at what has been working, believe it or not, in communities with much higher incidence of gang violence, and I'm talking about Boston. At this point, I'm talking about Boston, I'm talking about Los Angeles, and I'm talking about Chicago, all of which had, and still to this day in some instances, have very serious gun problems and gun violence problems. And in the areas where they were able to best tackle the problem is that they took a small community by community approach. And so they took what they call a problem-solving policing strategy to reduce gang violence and illegal gun possession and gun violence in communities. Trinidad is a small country, Madam President. We are a small country where a community approach to a lot of our problems is a very possible and very doable solution-oriented approach. But what you need, Madam President, is to have someone at the helm. The leadership needs to be thinking about solutions and not thinking about a reactionary approach. You ought to be thinking about how to be proactive, and that's where you end up looking at strategies used in Boston. And I bring up Boston because they did an operation. What they took is a small community where they understood one, gang culture and gun culture, and the importance of the guns to the people who were getting into that lifestyle. And they did the Operation Ceasefire, where they started to work with the schools, the churches. They put in the after-school programs, etc. And they focused on a small group of people, hoping that success in this small group of people, they could implement it elsewhere, and then another place and another place. Madam President, my presentation here today is basically to say if we looked at taking this war on crime, if you will, and we put it in our communities, and we took a community approach to the problem that we're facing, we would see the results we're looking for. Instead, we are taking this broad brush, tough on crime, war on gangs, war on guns strategy, an old strategy from the 1990s that then in some instances exacerbated the problem, because when you go to jail and you come out, the statistics show us you aren't rehabilitated, you aren't coming out a better person into society, and you aren't saying, you know what, this gun life is not for me, really and truly. So either we are hoping to lock up everybody and keep them in jail forever, and that's our solution, which then, Madam President, belies the same point that their manifesto indicated, which was an approach that would help families and look at our social and moral fabric as a society and take a preventative approach. Either that's not true, because when you have people rotting away in jail because we are tough on crime, and that is what is presented to us as a solution, Madam President, I would like to propose that what we're doing is creating a problem for another generation of Trinidadians in power to fix, because what you've done is exacerbated our problem because you never took the time to understand what created the problem and how to provide a solution-oriented approach. Madam President, when the Minister of National Security spoke about the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service asking for this, and the statement made was that it's not sufficient to give. They're not just asking for new bulletproof vests and new firearms and new vehicles, and that those who are involved in the process of investigating and who are doing it properly, they've faced a number of problems, etc. And you know, Madam President, I had to laugh at that because the People's Partnership Administration and Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar had a plan for the Day Bay campus, that the Day Bay campus would be part of our training for protective services and double as a faculty for the public training, which would allow for certificates, diplomas, degrees in policing, criminal justice, investigation, etc. And that allow for a postgraduate degree for the protective services, a curriculum that would be designed and allow for a more strategic approach to policing. And that plan was in front of the government, a thing that they were that once they gained power could have enacted, recognizing that crime was a problem, thinking about having a solution-oriented approach. Then to come here, scrapping that, and 4 years later tell me the police aren't asking for bulletproof vests, etc. We knew that. We're saying they don't have that now. They'd like to at least get to the basic level, so do that. And then also think about all the other things you can do to improve policing as a strategic and important arm of our crime prevention and crime solution strategies, Madam President. All of those things have been ignored. So then you come here and you tell us, listen to me, please help us do your bit as a legislator, ignoring the fact that the government has failed to do its bit as a policymaker.
At this, you're now starting in your presentation, it's a cycle. And you're now going back over issues that you've raised. You've used different words, but it's the same issue that you are addressing. So I'm going to ask you, please, to either make some new points or wrap up your contribution.
No problem, Madam President. I was actually at the point of talking about what because a cry that we hear all the time is that we say the government isn't doing this, etc., etc., and what would we do differently? What would we do differently? And the reason I raise that is because that's one of the things that we would absolutely do differently, Madam President. So when you talk about what tools you are giving the police service, we are not going to say to the police service, we will give you a firearms amendment bill, we'll give you you could lock up everybody. We are going to say, this is how you will be able to, this is the academic approach to building your case and gaining the convictions you seek, making sure the people who need to be behind bars are behind bars, making sure the people that you can help can be helped, and we're taking a very strategic approach to this thing, because while the minister said this is that what he has presented here for us today is the present, and that all the talk from before was the past, Madam President, what I was hoping to put on the table was in fact the future and where we need to be as a society and where we ought to be going as a society. Madam President, when we look at the crime situation, a number of interventions that have been made in specifically with respect to firearms and reducing gun violence has been looking at taking it from a public health approach, from a public policy approach, where how you message to people before they get into that life of crime, before they find themselves becoming caught under this piece of legislation. We were looking at, Madam President, using all our social media platforms, using our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Defense Force, all of these people, Madam President, and making sure they're in the communities and fostering a trust between our protective services and our communities again. And so, Madam President, as I conclude, we recognize absolutely that crime is a problem. We also understand very clearly that guns are a problem. What we are saying...
Senator, I mean you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Haynes, I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam President. What we are saying clearly and unequivocally is that what you've presented today and what you've presented over the last 4 years have not been the solution, and the numbers bear that out, Madam President. There is no fear-mongering. There is no trying to create any panic. It is a simple fact of life in Trinidad and Tobago that we are a nation that is afraid and that we would like to see somebody do something that provides a solution. It is not sufficient to say, if they come and shoot at you, we would lock them up for the rest of their lives. Because, Madam President, you are not solving the problem facing Trinidad and Tobago. And I thank you.
Senator Vieira.
Madam President, in the early 1990s, I was a prosecutor in the British Virgin Islands. And one of my enduring memories is a prosecution I did with respect to illegal firearms. On the table next to me was a beautiful submachine gun and some automatic weapons. And so I held up that submachine gun for dramatic effect, and I turned around. Well, Madam President, the effect was electrifying and gratifying and immediate. Everybody ducked for cover, including the Chief Magistrate, even though the gun wasn't loaded. So I understand the empowering effect a gun has, feelings of power and invulnerability. Research has shown that owning or holding a gun can have a significant effect on our perceptions and behavior. Guns, in particular, tend to empower financially unstable men. With a gun in his hand, such a person feels secure, respected, and in control. There is a gun culture, and we need to appreciate the symbolic power of guns. Guns offer a false sense of power and identity. Their very presence can stimulate aggressive behavior. Drug dealers carry guns to boost their street credibility. So, the Honorable Minister of National Security talked about the only purpose for guns being to kill. But truthfully, guns can also be used as a sort of fashion accessory by criminals. For the person who is underprivileged, afraid, suffering low self-esteem, having a gun is empowering. And we can pass all the legislation we want. Those on the outlaw trail are not going to hand over their guns voluntarily. And the problem is further compounded by the fact, as Senator Thompson-Ahye quite rightly pointed out, research has shown that in the case of young male offenders, their brains do not fully mature until they're in their 20s. It has to do with the development of the neocortex. So how how does one impress on the potential young offender that his behaviors are self-defeating when he's not thinking rationally, if he's thinking at all? Research also tells us that the young adult male is prone to function in ways that are predisposed to risk-taking. And they tend to focus on the immediate rather than on the abstract and on remote threats such as this legislation. From the offender's perspective, they may believe they are justified in breaking the law and carrying out criminal acts because they have these narratives that justify crime, justify violence, narratives such as, oh, everything is stacked against me. Society is cruel and oppressive. I'm a victim and I have no future. The world against me and me against the world. I must defend myself. So we should be developing narratives which help to promote law-abidingness and healthy development. And ironically, by upping the ante in terms of punishment and making guns even more forbidden fruit than they are, we may be making firearms more attractive in certain quarters. So there is definitely a psychology at play here. Now, is this legislation necessary? Well, the short answer is yes. Crime has spiraled out of control, and drastic measures are necessary to maintain law and order. The Honorable Minister of National Security gave us some very interesting statistics. 207 murders with illegal firearms, 403 wounding and shootings with illegal firearms, 619 charges for illegal firearms. It's bad. In the words of Marvin Gaye's What's Going On? Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. Now, Madam President, I love soul. And every fiber in my being was calling out for me to sing that verse. But my wife warned me. She said, she begged me not to subject this honorable house to cruel and unusual punishment. So I refrained. But if Marvin Gaye's lament is not enough, we should also factor that a number of jihadists, persons who have fought with ISIS, hardened arms bearers, arms users, will be returning to this country. And so a failure to block easy access to guns and to immobilize those who would carry them will present a real and present danger to the citizens of this country. And as we've heard, it is the police who confront the dangers time after time on the public's behalf. So the whole country and we in the Senate have a responsibility to take guns out of circulation. Government would be remiss. In fact, government would be negligent and reckless if it doesn't take from upfront, if it does not use its best endeavors towards neutralizing an already dangerous situation from becoming even more fraught. Now, the thrust of this legislation is, in the words of the Honorable Attorney General, about how we manage crime in our society. And among other things, he talked about the high recidivism rate. And as evident from the proposed legislation, government's preferred solution seems to be, let's lock everybody up. 15 clauses of this bill are about imprisonment. 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 23, and 24. All speak about imprisonment. 12 clauses of this bill impose imprisonment for the remainder of.
At this juncture, sitting will be suspended and we will return at 2 p.m.